Hi guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be a very quick August reading wrap up. These are the books that I read in the month of August. And I had a pretty good month. I read a decent amount, but they didn't all wow me. And that's why I feel like it was a okay month. I'm going to start with the books that I just finished reading actually today. And it's actually the second book in a series. I'm just going to talk about the series by itself. And it's the 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. This is the series. And the books one is 1,000 Pieces of You, and book 2 is 10,000 Skies Above You. So there is a third book called A Million Worlds with You. I was hoping to finish the series because next month when I talk about the final book, I won't be able to talk about the first two books like without spoiling it. So, so it is what it is. I couldn't squeeze it in because, like I said, I had other things going on. But anyway, I'm going to talk about these two books, mainly about the first one. But we follow our main character, Marguerite, who is the daughter of like these brilliant scientists who have discovered how to travel, it's time travel, but between dimensions. So it's not necessarily going back in time, but you can go into another dimension in current time. I hope that makes sense. So it's kind of like if you guys watched like Loki and are into like the Marvel world, when you hear about multi-dimensional travel, it's kind of like that. But anyway, Marguerite's dad was able to discover how to do that, and he created a little apparatus thing that people wear in order to travel between these different dimensions. And so her father ends up getting murdered, and the suspect of his murder is one of his graduate students that he was working with. And so once her dad dies, he disappears, the suspect. And so she enlists the help of another graduate student, Theo, to help her travel to these different dimensions in order to find out exactly what happened and to see if Paul is actually responsible for her father's death. Now, in searching for Paul and traveling through these different dimensions, she ends up like in Russia, being part of like the Russian royalty. All this stuff happens. There's a love triangle. The second book is very heavily involved in the love triangle. So far this series has been a 3 out of 5 stars for me. It hasn't wowed me yet, and mainly because I feel like the time travel, the dimensional travel, it's kind of difficult. Like, I don't really catch it when it happens. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, we're in San Francisco. Oh wait, no, we're in London now. Oh wait, how did we get to Russia? So it's kind of like I have to go back and really pay attention. So it's a little confusing to me. So for that reason, right now it's a 3 out of 5. We'll see how the third book pans out. I also read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I was hoping to catch this movie in theaters, but by the time I finished reading this book, the movie had been pulled from theaters, so I'm gonna have to wait until it's like available on streaming, whenever that is. We'll see where it goes. But I'm in the minority with this book because I didn't really care for it. Like, I know this is supposed to be like, it was super popular, that's why they made a movie, but I just thought it was okay. We follow our main character, what is her name? Kaya, and she is known as the Marsh Girl because she lives in an area called the Marsh. And the Marsh, to me, the way that I pictured it was like in the movie Waterboy, you know how where Bobby lives with his mom? It's kind of like a little shack in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the wilderness, and they're kind of separated. She never went to school. She's not educated, so she's kind of like a little, not hillbilly, but kind of like a, I don't know how to describe it. But she's not like the way normal people grow up. And then she lives alone. She doesn't have any parents. So she's kind of like this weird girl that lives in the wilderness, and it's just, she's looked down upon. Anyway, she falls in love as a teenager with this boy. This boy eventually goes away to college, and then he comes back, but then when he comes back, he ends up dead. Everybody knows that he was involved with her, so of course she's the main suspect in his murder. And so we follow her from when ever since she was a child, all throughout her elderly years, heavily focused on her adult years, which is when the guy goes missing, and she actually goes to trial for his death. And so this book was just okay for me. I was expecting a lot more. This is what happens when books are overly hyped. And you know what? It gave me a lot of vibes of Fried Green Tomatoes. I've never read the book, but I've seen the movie many, many times. And it gave me vibes of Fried Green Tomatoes. Like, you see how things happen from other people's perspective, and then at the end of the book, you go back in time and see how things actually happened. So yeah, I mean, I liked it. It's a good book, but I wouldn't say it's 5 out of 5 stars like everybody says it is. The next book that I read was Midnight in Chernobyl. This is a big hunker of a book. The untold story of the world's greatest nuclear disaster. I am ashamed to say that I had never heard of Chernobyl and the events that happened. In my defense, I was an infant. I was a newborn when this happened. So why would I have heard of it? And it's not something that they teach in the United States as part of the history. I don't know if it's part of like European history. But yeah, as far as I know, this isn't taught here. But we follow the explosion of the nuclear reactor in Chernobyl, and the effects that it had, and how the Soviet tried to downplay it, how they tried to minimize. And it was a whole lot of things that happened, that everything that could have gone wrong went wrong that night. And so it was hard to pinpoint exactly what happened, because out of an infinite amount of things that could have gone wrong, they all went wrong. So it was hard to find who was to blame for the nuclear reactor to explode. Currently, Chernobyl and the closest city, Pripyat, have been evacuated. There's nobody that can live there. They do have a few tours, and which is how I kind of heard about it. I watched Kara and Nate from their travel vloggers, and they did a series on Chernobyl, and that's the first time that I heard about it a couple of years ago, during the pandemic. Side note, during the pandemic I started watching all their videos from start to finish, and so I watched the documentary when they went to Chernobyl. Anyway, that's when I first heard about it, and then when I saw this book on Book Outlet and it had great reviews, I was like, let's pick it up. So that's how I ended up with this book. Anyway, after watching this book, I saw the series on HBO Max called Chernobyl. I think it was done in 2019. It's an excellent supplement to reading this. If you don't feel like reading this big book, and you have HBO Max, you should watch Chernobyl. It's great. It's a great book. Loved it. One of my favorite books that I read this year. Something a little bit more lighthearted is Waiting for Tom Hanks by Kerry Winfrey. This book, I had no expectations because it kind of has a low rating on Goodreads, but I actually really enjoyed it. Totally opposite of When the Crawdads Sing. But this book is about our main character, Annie, who is a hopeless romantic, and she is in love with Tom Hanks. Not Tom Hanks the actor, but the Tom Hanks that plays our hero in romantic comedies like Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, those kinds of movies that he did way back in the day. So she's hoping to find a guy like the guy that Tom Hanks plays in real life. She ends up working in a movie set, and she meets our male protagonist, who is the male protagonist for the movie that she's working with. And he's kind of a jerk. He's kind of like, not a womanizer, but you know, he knows he's good looking and the girls like him and stuff. So she's like, I can't be falling for him. He's not the guy that Tom Hanks plays in the movie. So he cannot possibly be the guy for me. And so we follow as she slowly starts falling for him and realizing that, hey, maybe he's the guy for me after all. So it was super cute. It's very short book to read, and it's great. I have her other 2 books, and I'm hoping that I'll enjoy them just as much. The next book that I have here is Finlay Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano. And in this book, we follow Finlay Donovan. She is a struggling writer who is trying to make ends meet. She is literally broke from going through a divorce. And now she's super broke, like her utilities are being turned off. She almost missed her mortgage payment. And her ex-husband is keeps bailing her out from all these financial troubles that she's going through. And she's in the middle of a battle custody with her husband, and she's like, well, this isn't looking good if I don't have money, and they keep shutting off our appliances, they're gonna take my kids away from me. So she ends up meeting her editor at a coffee shop, and while they're having a discussion, a lady overhears them, totally misinterprets the situation, but she thinks that Finlay is someone who kills people, like she's a hit woman. Someone who kills people, right? That's what they're called, hit women, hitmen. And so she hires Finlay to kill her husband. And she's so desperate for money that she's like, fine, I'll do it. Like, I will do anything for this amount of money. So she's about to go through with it, and she's like, I cannot do this. This is just not who I am. I'm not that desperate. I need to tell this lady that, our deal is off. Before she can do that, the guy that she's supposed to kill ends up being dead, and the lady thinks that she did it. And now there's an investigation going on, and all things point to her because she was supposed to be the person, to kill her. So we follow all these different twists and turns that happen in order for Finlay to find who was the actual murderer, because she wants to clear her name, and then at the same time trying to come up with a good book idea so she can finish her book, so she can make money for her kids. It's a fun book to read. It has a lot of twists and turns, and I do have the second one. It's called Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead, and I think the third book just came out. So it was a fun book. Glad that I read it, and it's fun. It's a fun murder mystery book. The next book that I have here is The King of Crows by Liva Bray. This is the fourth book in the Diviner series. I can't talk much about it because it's the fourth book and it's a finale, but it was a really good way to wrap up the series. It's a big book, very big book. Basically, The Diviners is a book about our girl Evie, I think it's her name. She ends up being sent to New York to live with her uncle because she's being punished for something that she did. And she's being punished, and it's in quotations, because she actually wanted to go to New York City, live the life. It's set in the 1920s. Shh, sorry, the dogs. It's set in the 1920s, so she wanted to live the glamorous life in New York, only to discover that her uncle is part of this kind of like secret society that has supernatural abilities, and we go from there. So it was a nice way to finish up the series. I enjoyed it. The third book did kind of give me the creeps a little bit. It's kind of like a spooky book, but it was nice. It was good. I'm glad that I read it, and it was a fun way to end the series. One book that I was kind of disappointed with is I'll say it myself. When Women Pray by T.D. Jakes. This book is a tiny little book, and I wanted to love this book, but I couldn't. I think I only gave it 2 stars. 2 or 3 stars. It's 180 pages, so to begin with, it's very small. It has 10 chapters plus a conclusion plus an introduction. So basically it has 12 chapters. So divide 180 pages by 12, however that is. It's less than, I don't know how many pages that is. And the writing is super big. Like the font is very big, and it's very spaced out. So there's not a lot of meat in here to begin with. So I feel like the 10 women that he focused on, it was just talked about very superficially, and I wanted like a little bit more meat. So that's why I was left kind of disappointed. I feel like I wasn't left like inspired, or I felt like I learned anything new or saw anything from a different perspective. I felt like maybe he should have done 7 women instead of 10 or 5. If if you can't add that much meat to the story, then like condense it. That way you can expand on the little bit. You know, I feel like this book focused on quantity over quality, unfortunately, and I didn't really care for it. I'm running out of light. The next book that I have here is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I have heard a lot of things about Emily Henry's books, and I was excited to read this one, but I was kind of let down with this one a little bit. We follow, it's a friends to lovers story, or ex-friends to lovers story. We follow Alex and Poppy, who used to be friends, and every summer they would go on vacation to kind of like rekindle their friendship. But after one vacation, something happens, they get into an argument and they stop their tradition of going on vacation together. Fast forward 5 or 6 years later, Poppy reaches out to Alex and says, hey, for old time's sake, let's just go on vacation one more time. At first things are awkward, but after spending some time together, they realize that there are true feelings for each other, and we just see the story blossom. So the title is misleading because it's called People You Meet on Vacation. So I thought it's gonna be about two strangers who randomly met each other while they were vacationing solo. That's what I thought it was gonna be about, and how they fell in love. But it's actually about two friends rekindling their friendship. There's a different, I think in the UK, it's called You and Me on Vacation, which that title makes a lot more sense than this one. So I enjoyed it, but I was expecting a completely different story based on the title. And the last book that I read this month, or the last book that I have to show you, is Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. This is the sequel to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This book picks up right after the first book, in which our main character, Pip, has become a super famous podcaster because she was able to solve a crime that happened a few years ago in her town, and it was part of her high school project that she solved this mystery. So she becomes famous. She has this podcast, and she's pretty well known. And so one day the brother of her best friend disappears without any reason whatsoever. Nobody knows what happened to him. So he asks Pip if he can help her find her brother. At this point, something has happened, and Pip is like, I am done with trying to solve crimes. This is just not for me. It's not working in my favor as well as I thought it would. And so at first she doesn't want to, but then he's like, hey, he's my brother. Like, it's not some stranger. You know him, we know him, and it's not like him to just, take off and disappear. So we follow her trying to find out what happened to her BFF's brother. It was really good, really interesting. Not as good as the first one. I think the first one was very original, even though it probably not very realistic. High school student solving a crime, a cold case for that matter. And this one was, it was missing something. It didn't quite have the magic that the first one had, but I mean, I still enjoyed it. So that's that one. There you have it, guys. Those are all the books that I read in the month of August. We'll see how September goes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.